like to introduce Jimmy, who is celebrating 62 years. And with that, Jimmy, welcome to our group and take over.
Oh, thank you very much, Joanne. Thank you all for having me here. I'm nervous. This is out of my league here. I'll tell you a little bit how about was. I'm Jim, an alcoholic. I'm a member of the old Salem group. Let me tell you a little bit about our group. In September, we celebrated as a group. We celebrated 74 years. We started in September of 1946. And the people, the guys that was going there, they was from Peabody, Salem, Beverly, Danvers. They was in this Lynn City Hall group, and they decided they wanted to start a group in Salem and have a little club there. So this is what they did. They broke off, and a lot of the guys went to this, but they still belonged to that other group. And in them days, there wasn't many meetings around. And they took roll call all the time. And if they didn't know someone's name that said the Polish guy or the Irish guy or the French guy or something like that. And when I come in 1958, up until 1963, they were still taking roll call, and then we did away with it. You know, they have a book. They'd check you off in a book and see whether you came or not and who called who and stuff like that. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about how it was before I drank, while I drank, how it's been since coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know when I took my first drink. My father was an alcoholic. There was booze in my house as far back as I can remember. And in those days, they used to make shine. They used to make home brew, and this is what they did. We had no central heating. We had no toilet or hot water. We had a coal stove and wood stove, and we had an outhouse. And at the winter time, it would get real cold. And my mother had one of these long handles there, and it looked like two frying pans on top of each other, and they'd put hot coals in it and stick it into the sheets to warm up the beds. And then they'd throw newspapers on you and then put coats over them to keep you warm. So they'd give you a shot of that shine to warm up your belly. So I have no idea when I took my first drink. They give it to us when it was really small. But I do remember when I was a young boy, I took a pint of wine out from underneath the mattress. I took a couple of belts out of it. It warmed up my belly. I staggered around and I pretended that I was drunk. I had been drunk on occasion when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. My serious drinking started when I was 15 to 16. School went out the window. I had trouble with the law, etc., etc. I experienced my first blackout of any consequences when I was 17. It became quite violent. 3 people had witnessed what I had done. During the course of events, I was taken to a psychiatrist. And I told him, I says, I don't remember. I was drinking and I don't remember. And he explained to me, he says, there's some people when they drink, they have a form of amnesia. Now, when I say I had a blackout, I don't mean that I was falling down, staggering around drunk. I mean, I could operate. I would give the appearance of being so, but I had no recollection at all of what I did when I was in this condition. The fact that I became violent didn't surprise me. I had a violent temper. What bothered me was I thought these guys were setting me up. I thought that they was lying. And this is the kind of drinker that I was. I'll tell you a couple of things that happened to me during my drinking, how I felt and how I thought at the time. And if you're new, coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous, it's very, very important to identify with the speaker and how they thought and felt. Not necessarily the things that they did, but it's the thinking and the feelings inside that's involved. There was one time, there's 5 of us guys, we were heading in town. We left the joint in Peabody. We were heading in town to Boston. I'm sitting in the front seat, drinking out of a beer glass that I taken to the bar. Next thing I remember, I woke up with a pain in my leg, and I was hanging up the driver's side of the car. He had my leg over his knee. He's trying to bust my leg. I kicked him in the face 3 or 4 times. Guys broke it up. I said to one of my friends, what did a crazy bastard do that for? And he snapped and he turned on me. And he said, it isn't him, you crazy bastard, it's you. For no reason at all, when he was driving a car, you took the beer glass, you smashed it in his face. We ended up in the middle of the rotary. We could have all been killed. Well, this is where the disease of alcoholism comes in, because I immediately justified my action and I protected my right to drink. I didn't blame it on the fact that I was drinking that I did. I blamed it on the fact that we was kids growing up. This guy was a real big guy, and he was a bully. And I was always a skinny kid. And every time he seen me, he used to beat me up. So I must have remembered it when I was drinking, and I got even with him. No matter what I did when I was drinking, I would justify my action. Always, always protect my right to drink. There was another occasion the cops come down the house to arrest me. They had to break down the door to get me. When they did, I went after the cops with a butcher knife. Now, the fact that I had tore the gas stove from the wall, I tipped over the refrigerator, busted up all the furniture, and I beat up my wife. In my mind, this had nothing at all to do with drinking. Nothing to do with drinking at all, although I was drunk. This was all my wife's fault. If she kept her nagging goddamn mouth shut, it never would have happened. It was her fault. It was my temper. But it had nothing to do with drinking. Now, I didn't know this at the time that this was going on. I learned all of this from drunks in Alcoholics Anonymous that did the same things as me. It's the thinking and the feelings behind it, you know. There was another occasion I got whacked out. I ended up in traction. I come to a couple of days later. This is over a period of time. And I said, you know, if I didn't take them last couple of drinks, things would have been different. I found out since coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, if I hadn't had that first drink, I never would have been in that particular situation in the first place. I would have had something to run away, etc., etc. There was another occasion, my wife was expecting a second child. Came that time, I took her up to the hospital. I said, look, hon, I'll come back to see you this afternoon. Now, I honest to God meant to go back to see my wife that afternoon. But I went to a joint and I started drinking. 1 o'clock came, I says, I'll go up at 2. 2 o'clock came, I says, I'll go up at 3. 3 o'clock came, I says, I'll go up at 4. Procrastination. This is part and parcel of the disease of alcoholism. I didn't know anything about compulsion or obsession. They were not words in my vocabulary. But what I did know is when I picked up a drink, I would beg, borrow, or steal to keep drinking. When I arrived at the hospital a day or so later, I walked into the room. My wife looked at me. She started crying. And when she was crying like that, my feelings got hurt inside. And anytime my feelings got hurt inside, I was like a wounded animal. I wanted to rip and tear. And I looked around the room, and there was 3 other women in the room with her. On their end tables, they had cards, flowers, and gifts. It was a very happy, joyous occasion. My husband was visiting them. And I looked at these guys, and I wanted to jam it up with these guys. I wanted to tear the eyes out of their head. Not because I was tough, and not because I was crazy. Because these guys were doing the things that I wanted to do. I hated my father. I did not want to be like my father. I loved my wife very, very much. I've known her since she was 16. I wanted to be a decent husband, and I wanted to be a decent father. But I was suffering from a progressive illness, and I didn't know it. I did not know that I was an alcoholic. I knew that I was a badass. I knew that. And I knew that I was a drunk. But I knew nothing about the disease of alcoholism. There was another occasion, my son Jimmy, he's sober 39 years today. He was a little boy, came into the room and he says, Daddy, there's something wrong with Kevin. Something wrong with Kevin. I went into the other room and I picked up my son Kevin, who was 10 months old, and I knew that Kevin was dead. I had seen death before. It was no stranger to me, but it never quite had the effect that this did. During the course of events, I was taken a member of the clergy, and at that particular time, I took the 4th and 5th step of Alcoholics Anonymous, unbeknownst to me. I took a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself, and I confessed to God, myself, and another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. I did this to the best of my ability at the time. I caught pleas for things that I had done that I figured I would take to the grave with me, that no other human being would know about. But I was motivated by hurt and pain that I had inside, and I was willing to do anything. And in those days, we used to take pledges. and the priest suggested that I take a pledge. I took a pledge for 3 months, and I swore on the grave of my son that I wouldn't drink for 3 months. And in 2 weeks' time, I was drinking again. And there were many a time I drank after that. I couldn't get drunk. What I mean by that is I would lose my body functions. I would fall down, but I would be aware. I would always be aware of the hurt and the pain that I had way down deep inside of my soul. And in those days, I drank for oblivion. I would drink so much wine, and I would pray to God that I would pass out and not walk around in a blackout. It was on one of these occasions, I'm bumming around the city of Peabody. I couldn't go in any bars in Peabody or Salem. And I was hurting, and I was crying, and I was hurting, and I needed a drink. And I remember my father, he had a room in the House of Horrors where the Dunkin' Donuts is in the square now. And I went up to his room, checking his door, and he's laying in the bed, he's mumbling the rosary beads that he had. I said, I need a drink. He gave me some wine. I started to drink the wine. I called him all kind of bastards because I didn't go to my son's funeral. And he looked at me and he says, son, he says, why don't you stop your drinking before you end up just like me? And I says, how? How do I stop? Because I had tried hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times to stop drinking. And my problem was I could never stop drinking. And the only answer he had for me is, you're young. You're young. As if being young gave someone the strength and the power to stop drinking. And I said, I can't. He says, oh God, no, not you too. Before I left the room that night, I tore the rosary beads out of his hands. I ripped up the beads. I threw the beads at him. I spit at him. I slapped him a couple of times. I wished that he was dead. 2 weeks later, my sister Ann called up and she says, Dad's dead. I remember how I thought and felt. I was glad that my father was dead. And my thinking at the time was, who the hell's going to say anything about my drinking now? If anyone's got an excuse to drink, it's me. At this point in time, I didn't need any excuse to drink. I was totally obsessed with booze. I was doing a lot of drinking that I didn't want to do. I was down at my mother's house, and she says, will you go to his room and get his belongings? When I looked at the room, it was padlocked. I had to go over to the station. And it was a captain there. And we hadn't seen each other for a long time. This guy, when he was a patrolman, he used to put me in his cruiser. All my friends was in farm school. And I'd be about 11, 12, 13 years old. They put me in his cruiser, in the back of the cruiser, and then the place got broken in. He'd pump me and ask me. But he was a guy that had compassion for me. And he says, your mother's in this country all by herself. She hasn't got a soul over here. Your father's in jail again. He says, why the hell don't you get yourself a job? And there wasn't many jobs open in those days. It motivated me in some way or other. I got a job for 10 cents an hour on the farm. I sold newspapers. I worked in a candlepin bowling alley. I set up pins. I shaved pins. I worked in a cafeteria. I worked in a laundry. I worked in a leather factory. And a leather factories, they had a big sign. No child labor under 14 years old. Now, we didn't work for the manufacturers. We worked for the guys that was on piecework. For every piece of leather that they produced, they get so much money for it. And at the end of the week, the payroll guy would come around, all the money would be in an envelope, and they'd open up the envelope, they'd give the exchange and $1 or something like that. And every place I worked, I split the money with my mother. But what she didn't know, that every place that I worked, me and my friend would break into them. And if we had seen kids in the neighborhood who was working someplace and we didn't know how to get into it, we'd ask him to leave a window open, or we'd go down and cut the ADT alarm with a jackknife, and they didn't fix them until the next day anyway. We watched to see if they come back. And with me and his cop, we talked about an hour and a half, and then the landlord came, and he got a patrolman, and he says, take the kid over there, let him take anything he wants. And I walks into the room, and they open the room, and I says, I wonder what Ma would want. And I looked around, and I got the faded blue suit, the overcoat, the soft hat, the pair of shoes, and the crucifix he could put on the mirror. And I brought this stuff home to my mother's house, and I laid it on the couch and gave it a crucifix. She picked up the overcoat, she hugged it. She started crying, and she says, "Oh my God, no, he was a good man, but he drank too much." My mother and father came from across the pond from Ireland to start a life in this country, and here he was 51 years old, 98 pounds, he was dead. Her attention focused on me. I was 120 pounds, and my teeth were missing. And she looked at me. She says, "Look at you. You're going the same way as him. One day it'll be your wife standing with a broken heart." And when she said that, my first instinct was I wanted to rip her face up. Not because I was tough, not because I was crazy. I was thoroughly convinced that I was going to die a very, very violent death. And it made no difference whether I carried a weapon or not. There was a period in my drinking, if I knew someone was after me and you carried a weapon, it gave you a sense of false courage. There was no false courage. The things that I was afraid of was ungrounded, unfounded fear. I was afraid, and there was no logical reason to be afraid. I was afraid. At the end of my drinking, I found myself in a cemetery at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I go to my son's grave, and I'd say, "Why? Why?" The pain was horrible. The pain was horrible. And I begged this God, give me a sign. I want to believe. In my drinking days, the churches used to be open 24/7. I used to go into the churches and kneel down before the statues, and I would pray and say, "Help me, please, please help me." And I begged and I begged. And I cussed this God at the gravesite. And I prayed to the devil at the gravesite. And I went to my father's grave, and it was at my father's grave that something happened. The man that I thought I hated so very, very much, I found out that I loved him too. Feelings started to well up inside of me that I had pushed down for years. I built a real tough shell around myself, and I wouldn't let anyone in. And if I met an old crony, I couldn't tell him about feelings like that. I couldn't tell him about the many times that my beautiful, beautiful wife stood in front of me and screeched and cried to the top of her lungs and says, "My God, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. I wish you was dead." And I'd stand there with a smirk on my face that saying that I didn't care. But I cared. God, I cared so much. I wanted to put my arms around her. I wanted to kiss her cheek, and I couldn't do it. There was another part of me inside. I wanted her to hurt. God, I wanted her to know my pain. If she only knew the hurt and pain that I had in my soul, she wouldn't be doing and saying the things she did. These are the things that killed me. No one ever had to teach me how to be a wise guy. Jealousy, possessiveness, lust, fear, revenge, manipulation, control. I've known these things as a child. The thing that killed me was love. It was caring. I was afraid to love. Every time I loved, I got my heart ripped out. Every time I trusted someone, I got pulled at once. These are the things that hurt me before I drank, while I drank. Love has the power to rip my heart out today, and it does. But I still love. I had heard about Alcoholics Anonymous, like I say, in the early 40s. One of the co-founders of the Salem group, Jerry Crowley, he took my father to Alcoholics Anonymous. A friend of mine got out of prison after 6 years. He took me to my first meeting in 1953. I come back to Alcoholics Anonymous in the fall of 1958. Since December 24th of 1958, I haven't had to drink a pill of a joint, mind and mood altering drug. Now, basically now, I'm talking to the new person or the person coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're new or coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous, it is not your fault. There's no blame for having the disease of alcoholism. If you're an alcoholic, it doesn't mean to say that you're a weak-willed person or a moral weapon. If you're an alcoholic, you've got a threefold disease. It's physical, mental, and spiritual. The physical part of this disease, it isn't the shakes, the wet or the dry heave, cirrhosis of the liver, or losing a limb in an automobile accident. physical part of this disease is that my body chemistry is different than a normal drinker. I have an allergy toward alcohol. When I take one drink of alcohol, put it in my system, it sets up a craving, a phenomenon of craving. And I have to drink to feed this physical compulsion. I didn't need 30 meetings in 30 days to understand it. And I knew long before AA that it was the first drink that got me drunk. But I didn't know why. When they told me in here it's because I had this physical allergy toward alcohol, I bought it. I bought it emotionally and intellectually. It explained to me why I drank like I drank. Now, when booze was working for me, there were many times I went into a joint with the guys, I felt the balls. I just wanted a couple of drinks to keep this feeling. Some of the guys I was with, they could go to work, they could go home for supper. Once I picked up a drink, I would beg, borrow, or steal to keep drinking. There's some people that can hear my voice, you can identify what I'm saying. You take one drink, put it in your system. This phenomenon of craving, this compulsion, coupled with this mental obsession, you proceed to go on a drunk. There's other people here, they can't identify with that. They're the type of people they can nip. They can take 1, 2, 3 drinks more like this for 2, 3, 4 months, whatever their particular pattern is. But if they have this allergy toward alcohol, this craving starts coupled with this mental obsession, these people proceed to go on a drunk. Just a minute here. The mental part of this disease, it isn't hallucinating, whacking people out or making incoherent sounds. The mental part of the disease of alcoholism is the obsession that he or she has with alcohol. And the alcoholic has no defense against the first drink. The doctor can go up to a heavy drinker and say, hey, look, you've got cirrhosis. If you drink again, you're going to die. Loved ones in the family can say, if you continue to drink like this, your ass is going on the street. We're not going to put up with this type of behavior. The employers can say you're going to lose your job. The law can say we're going to incarcerate you. This is sufficient reason for the heavy drinker to stop drinking. They're going to have some difficulty, but you can bet your ass they're going to stop drinking. Now you say the same thing to the alcoholic. The alcoholic doesn't want to lose emotional security. They don't want to have financial insecurity. They don't want to be incarcerated. They don't want to lose their health. And from the bottom of their heart, so many times we say, I swear to God, I'll never drink again. And you mean it. But once that idea of a drink comes into the mind of the alcoholic, no matter what defense they put up against it, it gives way. This is the mental part of the disease. Most people, if they go up and they touch a hot stove, they don't have to make an intellectual decision to pull their hand away. Our Creator built into the human organism a defense mechanism to protect it. It's called self-preservation. We lose this basic instinct with the disease of alcoholism. If you are an alcoholic sitting out there, you are bent on self-destruction. You may not know it, but you are bent on self-destruction. And it doesn't make any difference whether you do it driving a car, going in a bar and act like a Attila the Hun, or drink, or drugging yourself to death. This disease is out to destroy you. And the spiritual part of this disease, when you mention spiritual around the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous, people immediately think of heaven, hell, sin, virtue, God, the devil. This is the way we've been brought up in this society. What we're talking about basically is a loss or lessening of one's own particular set of values, the code that each and every one of us live by as individuals. We all have a code that we live by in the street. It's obscene and offensive for some people sitting in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not obscene and offensive to other people sitting in the halls of AA. The trouble usually starts on one-to-one relationships and in groups like this in countries all over the world. Just turn on your TV. When one person or one group imposes their will on someone else and says, my way is right, your way is wrong. You have to do it my way. Another thing about the loss or lessening of that, there was a period in my drinking like there is in everyone's drinking. You can always put your finger on someone else and say, man, if I ever get that bad, if I ever stoop that low, and the time comes, and the time goes, and you can't put the finger on anyone, you get it off. You broke every rule in the book, and when you arrive at that point in time, it doesn't make any difference anymore. They told me if I was an alcoholic, I'd be an alcoholic until the day I die. We have no cure for the disease of alcoholism and Alcoholics Anonymous. What we do have in here is a daily reprieve. I was told I could arrest this disease one day at a time. And sometimes you got to break the day down into an hour, a minute, or a second at a time. You go to meetings today, all you hear about is recovery, recovery, recovery. I've recovered from the direct results drinking alcohol. I don't have blackouts anymore. I don't lose my equilibrium on account of drinking and drugging. I don't have to wear the dry heaves. I don't have the shakes. I've recovered from these things. I have not recovered from the disease of alcoholism. Since Christmas Eve, 1958, I haven't had a drink, a pill, of a joint, a mind, and a altering drug. I sit here before you. I have the physical allergy inside of me. I haven't thought of a drink for 40 years. Haven't thought of a drink. That's been removed. But my first 17, 20 years, I thought of a drink all the time. I thought every pore in my body screeched for a drink. And I didn't drink. And I didn't believe in God, and I was staying sober. What the hell was keeping someone like me sober? I had no higher power. I didn't believe in it. Prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, my feelings got me drunk. My character defects got me drunk. My family got me drunk. The weather got me drunk. Work got me drunk. Everything got me drunk. The old timer says, no, John. These are excuses that the alcoholic uses. The only thing that's going to get you drunk is that first drink. I've had the obsession, like I say, for 17 to 20 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did not drink. I did not drink. So they boiled it down to that first drink for me, and this is only for me. It's a drink, a pill, or a joint, a mind, a mood altering drug. I believe in complete abstinence since the day I connect. Now, the toughest time that I ever had in my life was after I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. My wife was a very, very religious woman. She went to Mass and Communion every Sunday. She said the rosary, she lit candles, and she prayed that I would get sober. And I got sober. And after 3 years, she'd come up to me and says, Jim, why don't you just go out and get drunk? You're worse now than you ever was. I was a booze fighter, and I didn't know it. I hurt people I loved sober. I hurt people I didn't love. I had feelings I didn't want to have. I was thinking thoughts I didn't want to think. I was doing things I didn't want to do. God knows. I didn't want to be the bastard that I was, and I tried everything to change, and I couldn't change. I made 9 retreats in my search for God. I read books in philosophy, theology, psychology, always searching, always searching. I tried many, many spiritual disciplines. Always searching. And it was a process that I went through well over 20 years. Today I believe in God. I call it God. I don't know what God is. I lean towards something psychic or some kind of frequency or something. I don't know, but I feel, I sense it. I believe I turn my life and will over the care of God as I conceived God to be, which was Alcoholics Anonymous. I cleared away the wreckage of the past. I made amends to people and institutions I could make amends to, and I found out that some will accept your amends and some won't. And there's others that are dead. You can't make amends to them. You learn to live with all of the guilt and shame that goes with it. I continue to take an inventory of myself on a daily basis so no psychological garbage will build up inside of me. I was into meditation, working with other alcoholics, and I was going to meetings 7 days a week. What in God's name was this gnawing I had in my belly? After 20 years, a gnawing in my belly, a constant gnawing. We all got a different clinical name for it. We call it anxiety, stress, impending doom, the fight or flight syndrome, emptiness. I don't care what name you call it. If you're an alcoholic, you've known for years what to do about that feeling. You take a drink, a pill, a joint, a mind, a mood-altering drug, and this feeling would dissipate. This is the condition that I was in with all them years of sobriety. Why did I feel that way? Why did I have that feeling inside when someone else would come in with 6 months? They get up at the 40 minutes, say, I used to live in a house, and now I live in a home, and I love. And I'd sit out there, you suck, you couldn't be an alcoholic. I figured everyone had to think like me, everyone had to feel like me. Now, if you looked at my life objectively, like I say, I practiced these principles. I did everything possible. And what happened to me, I don't think I had a spiritual experience. It's debatable for some people, but what happened to me, I had an awakening. I had an awakened conscience. One time I'm watching a black and white TV. With years of sobriety, and there was a drunken father on there, and the 2 children are crying, and the mother's everyone's screeching to the top of their lungs. And I'm sober and I'm watching this TV. He gets over the table, and I started to cry. I seen the mother cry and the kids cry. He's a mad dog, and I wept. Now I was brought up with a strap, and my father would beat me till I stopped crying. I would like that, not to be crying. I got whipped not to cry, so I didn't cry. And here I was weeping. I mean, my first time, wow, weep. I said, what the hell is this? I had been to 9 retreats. Every time I went, I would go to the 4th step. That's why they get the 10th step there to pick it up afterwards, because you can't get all this shit up that you did, all this shit you buried down inside you. And what happened was I dealt with this stuff intellectually when I caught the plea. I dealt with it intellectually, but I didn't deal with it emotionally. And emotionally, it started to come up. And I started to feel on the television. And that was my wife. That was my wife that was crying. That was my children. I was that rotten bastard. I have never been the same. I have never been the same since that day. I've had many experiences like that. I feel pain for the people, and it hurts. Let me tell you a little bit about my family. I've got 5 children. Every one of them came to Alcoholics Anonymous. There's 2 of them. Jimmy's 39 years old. Barbara's got double digits. Her daughter, my granddaughter, has got double digit sobriety. My nephew's got double digit. His wife's got double digit sobriety. My sister Ann died with 42 years of sobriety. My sister Mary died with 37 years of sobriety. And Kathleen never made it. I believe in that, like I say, God. I call it God, and I don't know what it is. If I was born in a foreign country and a Muslim country, I guess I'd call it Allah, but I call it for simplicity's sake. My God, like I say, works through people. God is manifested in music, art, literature, nature. But it's at meetings like this, it's something you sense and feel. The bullshit goes out of the window. Something reaches right down inside your soul. You say, my God, I'm not alone. Someone knows how I feel. Everyone doesn't know. They don't have to. But as water seeks its own level, you will find people in here that you can identify. You may not like the people you identify with, but nevertheless, you can identify. We have something in the halls of AA that the medical profession don't have, the clergy don't have, and the psychiatric profession don't have. It's called a transmission line. It comes from the heart of a drunk, reaches the heart of a drunk. Today, everyone's going to life coaches. They're going to 12-step coaches. Everything everything. The therapist, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. The gift of sobriety was given to one drunk to give to another drunk. Everything I have learned, everything I have gained in Alcoholics Anonymous was in the trenches. It was in the trenches. It was talking to drunks and doing things to drunks. If I had to put a set percentage on how I feel inside my soul, 90% of the time in my life, I am a very, very well-adjusted psychopath. 10% of the time, I am completely out there, and I accept it totally. I accept it totally. I don't cuss myself out for it anymore. Me, with 62 years of sobriety, there are times I lose all faith. I curl up in the fetal position. No faith in nothing. Totally paranoid. Everything is a conspiracy. There isn't anything I can do about it. Just suffer and go through it. And don't take any medications and don't take nothing. And try to stay away from people and not hurt people with my mouth. I used to hurt them with my hands. And it passes. If you're new, coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you go home tonight and you can't sleep, and you have nightmares and you screech and cry, toss and turn all night long, if you're physically sober, you're doing it 100% right. There is no quick fix to this. Do not put the cart before the horse. I know what serenity is. I know what peace of mind and peace of soul is. And you can't grasp that no more than you can grasp a handful of water. And that was my problem when I felt these things and had these. I try to grasp it. You can't do it. It's impossible. It's impossible. It comes and goes in little pieces, little bits and pieces. And the older I get, I just turned 90 in November 11th. The older I get, the easier it becomes to live an hour at a time, a minute at a time, a second at a time. I want to leave you with this thought. We arrive in this world alone. We depart alone. This time called life was meant to share. Today we share with you, and you by your presence here share with us. In your search for sobriety, in your search for God, I wish you the best.